Marcus threw the divorce papers at Lorraine in front of everyone at his mother's birthday dinner. His new girlfriend laughed. His family clapped. They called her a broke embarrassment who contributed nothing. What they didn't know, Lorraine secretly owned the $152 million company that employed them all. The private dining room at Nouveau was packed with about 40 people, all dressed in their finest, celebrating Mrs. Diane's 60th birthday. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, throwing soft golden light across the room. Champagne flowed freely, laughter bounced off the walls. Everyone was having the time of their lives. Everyone except Lorraine. She sat at the edge of the long table, wearing a simple navy dress she'd owned for 3 years. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. No jewelry except for a small silver locket that hung close to her heart. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't crying either. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the white tablecloth in front of her. Marcus stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The room went quiet. He was a tall man, brown skin glowing under the lights, wearing a designer suit that fit him like it was made just for him. And it was. Lorraine had paid for it 2 years ago, back when she still believed in them. He cleared his throat and raised his glass. Everyone turned to look at him, smiling, expecting a toast to his mother. But Marcus wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking at Lorraine, and his eyes were cold. "I got something I need to say tonight," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the silence. "Something I've been holding in for too long." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers. Divorce papers. He held them up high so everyone could see. A few people gasped. His mother covered her mouth, but she wasn't shocked. She was smiling. Lorraine didn't move. She just kept staring at the table. Marcus walked over to where she sat and dropped the papers right in front of her plate. They landed with a soft thud. "I'm done," Marcus said, his voice loud and confident. "I'm filing for divorce. I can't do this anymore. I've been carrying dead weight for 10 years, and I'm tired." The woman sitting next to Marcus, Chantel, started laughing. She was light-skinned with long, honey-blonde hair that fell past her shoulders, dressed in a tight red dress that screamed for attention. She leaned back in her chair, sipping her champagne like she was watching a movie. Marcus's sister, Nicole, pulled out her phone and started recording. She was grinning from ear to ear, making sure she got every angle. Mrs. Diane stood up slowly, adjusting her silk scarf, and walked to the center of the room. She looked at Lorraine with pure disgust. "You know, I tried to give you a chance," Mrs. Diane said, her voice dripping with fake sadness. "I really did. But you never fit into this family. You never brought nothing to the table. No connections, no status, no class. My son deserves better." The room erupted in agreement. People nodded. A few of Marcus's cousins clapped. Someone in the back yelled, "Finally!" Lorraine still didn't move. Her hands stayed folded. Her face stayed blank, but her fingers brushed against the locket around her neck, a nervous habit she'd had since she was a little girl. Marcus leaned down close to her face, so close she could smell his cologne, the same cologne she used to buy him. "Sign them," he said quietly, but everyone could still hear. "Don't make this harder than it gotta be." Chantel stood up then, walking over to Marcus and wrapping her arm around his waist. She looked down at Lorraine with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, and just so you know," Chantel said sweetly, "I'm 3 months pregnant. We're having a baby. Marcus is finally gonna have the family he deserves." The room exploded. People cheered. Mrs. Diane started crying happy tears and hugged Marcus tight. Nicole posted the video to her Instagram story in real time with the caption, "New Beginnings by Felicia." Lorraine finally looked up. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Chantel. She looked at his mother, his sister, and all the faces staring at her like she was nothing. And then she stood up. Slowly, calmly, she picked up the divorce papers and held them in her hand. She didn't read them. She didn't tear them up. She just held them. Her other hand went to her locket again, fingers tracing the cool silver. "Okay," Lorraine said quietly. Her voice was so soft, people had to lean in to hear her. "Okay." That was all she said. She turned and walked toward the door. No tears, no shouting, no begging, just silence. As she passed the bar near the exit, a man in a gray suit watched her with wide eyes. He was Ronald, a senior investor who'd been invited by Marcus's boss. Ronald's mouth hung open slightly because he recognized her. He'd seen her face in business journals. He'd sat across from her in boardroom meetings. But before he could say anything, Lorraine was gone. The door closed softly behind her. The room erupted in laughter again. Marcus kissed Chantel in front of everyone. His mother raised her glass and declared, "To new beginnings." And just like that, they all went back to celebrating like nothing happened, like Lorraine had never existed at all. But Lorraine hadn't always been invisible. She hadn't always been silent. Once upon a time, she'd been a little girl with a loud laugh and big dreams, running barefoot through her grandmother's garden in rural Georgia. The house was small, barely 3 rooms, with a rusted tin roof that sang when the rain came. But it was home. Lorraine's grandmother, Miss Betty, was a short woman with silver hair she kept in 2 long braids. Her hands were rough from years of working in the fields, but they were the gentlest hands Lorraine ever knew. Miss Betty raised Lorraine after her parents died in a car accident when she was only 5 years old. Lorraine didn't remember much about them, just flashes. Her mother's voice singing in the kitchen, her father's laugh. But Miss Betty made sure she never felt alone. Every morning, Miss Betty would wake Lorraine up before the sun came up. They'd sit on the porch together watching the sky turn from black to purple to orange. Miss Betty would tell her stories about their family, about ancestors who'd survived things Lorraine couldn't even imagine. "Baby girl," Miss Betty would say, her voice deep and warm, "we come from builders. We come from people who made something out of nothing. Don't you ever forget that." Lorraine would nod, her small hand wrapped around her grandmother's wrinkled one. In the kitchen, there was a wooden shelf where Miss Betty kept her most precious things. A Bible, a photo of Lorraine's parents on their wedding day, and a small silver locket. Lorraine used to stare at that locket for hours, wondering what was inside. One day, when Lorraine was 16 and about to leave for college on a full scholarship, Miss Betty called her into the kitchen. She took the locket off the shelf and placed it in Lorraine's hand. "This was mine," Miss Betty said, "and now it's yours." Lorraine opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny photo of Miss Betty as a young woman, smiling wide, standing in front of a small store she used to own before it burned down. And next to the photo was a rolled-up piece of paper, so small Lorraine had to unfold it with her fingernails. On it, written in faded ink, was one word: build. "That's what we do, baby," Miss Betty said, tears shining in her eyes. "We build. Even when they tear us down, even when they don't see us, we build." Lorraine hugged her grandmother tight and promised she would. She never took that locket off, not once. When Miss Betty passed away 2 years later, Lorraine was alone, but she had her grandmother's words. She had that locket, and she had a fire inside her that wouldn't go out. Lorraine met Marcus when she was 26 years old. She was working 3 jobs back then, saving every dollar she could while quietly building her own business on the side. She'd started small, consulting for tech startups, helping them structure their operations. She was good at it, better than good. Companies started paying her more. She reinvested every cent, registered her business under a private trust, so her name wouldn't show up publicly. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to build. She met Marcus at a coffee shop in downtown Atlanta. He was sitting in the corner going over a script, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had this energy about him, this charm. When he smiled, the whole room felt warmer. Lorraine noticed him, but she didn't approach. She never approached men first. But Marcus noticed her too. "Excuse me," he said, walking up to her table with that smile. "You dropped this." He handed her a pen she didn't remember dropping. She took it anyway, said thank you, and went back to her laptop. But Marcus didn't leave. "What you working on?" he asked. "Business stuff," Lorraine said simply. "You?" "I'm an actor," Marcus said proudly. "Well, trying to be. Right now I'm just auditioning a lot." They started talking. Hours passed. Marcus told her about his dreams of being on the big screen, about how hard it was to break into the industry, about how his family didn't believe in him. Lorraine listened. She liked listening to him. He made her feel like the world was bigger than spreadsheets and business plans. They exchanged numbers. 3 months later, they were dating. 6 months after that, they moved in together. Lorraine loved Marcus. She loved how passionate he was, how he'd practice his lines in the mirror for hours, how he'd cook for her when she came home late from work. But she never told him about her business, not the full truth. When he asked what she did, she'd say she worked in consulting, which was true, just not complete. She wanted him to love her, not for what she was building, not for her money. She wanted to know if his love was real. So she kept quiet. She paid for his acting classes. She bought his headshots. She covered rent when auditions didn't pay. And Marcus let her. He never asked questions. He just assumed she had a decent job and was being generous. He never looked deeper, and Lorraine told herself that was okay. That love didn't need transparency. That one day, when the time was right, she'd tell him everything. But the time never came. Because 3 years into their relationship, Marcus finally booked a national commercial. It was for a car brand. He played a young professional driving through the city, smiling at the camera. It aired during prime time, and suddenly, Marcus wasn't just an aspiring actor anymore. He was recognized. People stopped him on the street. His Instagram followers jumped from 300 to 30,000 overnight. And something in him changed. He started caring about image, about status, about being seen. He started looking at Lorraine differently, like she didn't fit the picture he was building. His family noticed too. Mrs. Diane started making comments. "Marcus, baby, you need somebody who matches your energy now. Somebody who can be on your arm at events." His sister Nicole would post photos of Marcus with other women at industry parties, tagging them as future sister-in-law goals. Lorraine saw it all, but she stayed quiet. She told herself it was temporary, that Marcus would remember who held him down. But he didn't. He forgot. 6 months before that birthday dinner, things started falling apart fast. Chantel entered the picture like a storm. She was an influencer with 500,000 followers, known for dating men on the rise and boosting their profiles. She met Marcus at a networking event and immediately saw potential. She started commenting on his posts, showing up at his auditions, laughing at all his jokes, and Marcus ate it up. He started coming home later and later. He stopped asking Lorraine about her day. He stopped touching her, stopped looking at her. One night, Lorraine came home and found Marcus packing a bag. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I got a last-minute shoot in Miami," Marcus said, not looking at her. "I'll be back in a week." But Chantel posted a photo from Miami that same weekend. Her and Marcus on a yacht, his arm around her waist. The caption said, "Sometimes you just know." Lorraine saw it. She didn't say anything. She just sat on the couch, touching her locket, and cried. Mrs. Diane started visiting more often, always unannounced, always with something to say. "You know, Lorraine, you really let yourself go. When's the last time you got your hair done? Or, Marcus needs a woman who can keep up with him, someone polished. You understand, right? Nicole was worse. She'd come over and accidentally leave magazines open to pages about celebrity couples. She'd talk loudly on the phone about women who upgraded their men's lives. The disrespect was constant, and Marcus allowed it. One day, Nicole claimed she found evidence that Lorraine was cheating. She said she saw text messages on Lorraine's phone while she was in the bathroom. It was a lie, completely fabricated, but Marcus believed it. He didn't ask Lorraine for her side. He just believed his sister. "How could you do this to me?" Marcus yelled at Lorraine that night. "After everything He stopped himself, because deep down he knew. He knew Lorraine had given everything, but admitting that would have meant admitting he was wrong, so he didn't. Instead, he pulled away completely. He drained their joint bank account, $12,000 that Lorraine had put in there for emergencies. He used it to buy Chantel a brand new car, a white Mercedes with a red bow on top. Chantel posted a video of herself crying happy tears, thanking her man for seeing her worth. Lorraine's assistant at her company called her that day. "Ms. Hartwell," the assistant said carefully, "I saw the posts. Should we do something?" Lorraine was sitting in her office, staring out the window at the city skyline. Her company, Hartwell Enterprises, was worth over $150 million now. She had the power to end Marcus with one phone call, but she didn't. "Not yet," Lorraine said quietly. "Let me see how far they'll go." She wanted to see if Marcus would stop, if he'd remember, if any part of him still loved her. But he didn't stop. He kept going. The final breaking point came 2 weeks before the birthday dinner. Marcus came home late one night and found Lorraine sitting in the dark living room waiting for him. "We need to talk," Lorraine said. Marcus sighed like she was bothering him. "About what?" "About us." "There is no us, Lorraine," Marcus said coldly. He sat down across from her, not even trying to hide his frustration. "I've been thinking about this for a while. I want a divorce." Lorraine felt something break inside her chest, but her face stayed calm. "Why?" she asked. "Because you're not enough," Marcus said simply. "You never were. I thought maybe you'd grow, maybe you'd become somebody, but you stayed nothing." Lorraine's hand went to her locket. "Did you ever love me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "I loved who I thought you could be," he said. "But you stayed nothing, and I can't build a life with nothing." He stood up and walked to the bedroom. Lorraine sat there in the dark, alone, feeling like her chest had caved in. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch, holding her locket, remembering her grandmother's voice. "Build, baby. Even when they don't see you, build." At 3 a.m, Lorraine opened her laptop. She logged into her company's secure portal, looked at the numbers. Hartwell Enterprises now had a valuation of $152 million. She owned 68% of the firm that employed Marcus, his mother, and his sister. She had the power to change everything. Her CFO had been telling her for months that they needed to restructure. Cut the dead weight. Lorraine had been avoiding it because she didn't want to hurt Marcus. But that night, sitting alone in the dark, she realized something. Marcus had already hurt her. He'd been hurting her for years, and she'd let him because she thought love meant sacrifice. But love wasn't supposed to feel like death. Lorraine touched her locket one last time. "It's time, Grandma," she whispered, and she started making calls. The night of the Nouveau Gala arrived 3 months after the birthday dinner. Marcus was riding high. After the divorce went public, his social media blew up. People praised him for choosing himself. Chantel played the role of supportive new girlfriend perfectly. posting about their journey and real love. Marcus got promoted at his job to creative director, a title that sounded important but didn't mean much. His boss had only given it to him because Marcus's department was about to be absorbed by their largest investor, Hartwell Enterprises. But Marcus didn't know that. He just knew he was finally being seen, finally being celebrated. The gala was being held at the Ashford Grand, a luxury hotel with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The event was black tie, over 200 guests. Marcus brought Chantel as his date. She wore a gold dress that caught every light in the room. Marcus wore the same designer suit Lorraine had bought him years ago. He'd forgotten where it came from. Mrs. Diane and Nicole were there too, dripping in jewelry, taking photos for Instagram every 5 minutes. They were seated at the VIP table right near the stage. Marcus felt like he'd finally arrived, like he'd finally made it. The speeches started after dinner. Marcus's boss, Mr. Gerald, took the stage first. He was a heavy-set man with graying hair and a booming voice. "Tonight we celebrate a historic partnership," Mr. Gerald announced. "Our firm is merging with our largest investor, Hartwell Enterprises. This partnership will take us into the future." People clapped. Marcus clapped too, not really paying attention. He was too busy texting someone about an audition. "And now," Mr. Gerald continued, "I'd like to introduce the founder and CEO of Hartwell Enterprises." The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the double doors at the back of the ballroom. They opened slowly, and Lorraine walked in. She was wearing a floor-length emerald gown that hugged her body perfectly. Her hair was down, falling in soft curls past her shoulders. Her skin glowed. She looked like royalty, but it wasn't the dress or the hair that made people stare. It was her energy. She walked with her head high, shoulders back, calm and powerful. Her attorney and CFO flanked her on both sides. The room went completely silent. Marcus's fork clattered onto his plate. His mouth fell open. Chantel's eyes went wide. Mrs. Diane grabbed Nicole's arm, confused. "What is she doing here?" Nicole whispered. Lorraine walked all the way to the front of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She stepped onto the stage. Mr. Gerald handed her the microphone with a respectful nod and stepped back. Lorraine looked out at the crowd. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, and then they landed on Marcus. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Lorraine smiled, not a warm smile, not a cruel smile, just a small, knowing smile. "Good evening," Lorraine said, her voice clear and steady. "Some of you know me as Marcus's ex-wife." She paused. Let that hang in the air. Marcus tried to sink into his chair. Chantel looked around nervously. "Some of you laughed at me 6 months ago," Lorraine continued. "At a birthday dinner. You called me broke, a burden, dead weight. You threw divorce papers at my feet and celebrated like it was a victory." Mrs. Diane's face went pale. Nicole's phone was still in her hand, but she wasn't recording anymore. She was frozen. "What you didn't know," Lorraine said, her voice calm but cutting, "is that for the past 10 years, I've been building Hartwell Enterprises in silence. I started with nothing, worked 3 jobs, saved every dollar, invested, grew, built." She walked slowly across the stage, the microphone in one hand, her other hand touching her locket. "This company you're celebrating tonight, I own it. I am Hartwell Enterprises." The room erupted in whispers. People turned to each other, confused, shocked. Ronald, the investor from the birthday dinner, stood up in the back and started clapping slowly. He'd known all along. Marcus stood up too, but not to clap. He looked panicked. "Lorraine, wait," he started, but Lorraine raised her hand and he stopped. "I funded your acting classes, Marcus," Lorraine said, looking directly at him. I paid for your headshots, your rent, your car. I carried you for 10 years while building a $152 million company in silence, and you called me nothing. Chantel slowly started sliding her chair back, trying to disappear, but everyone noticed. As of tonight, Lorraine said, turning back to the crowd, Hartwell Enterprises is restructuring. We're cutting inefficiencies, and Marcus, your department no longer exists, effective immediately. Marcus's boss stood up, looking at papers his assistant just handed him. His face went white. Mrs. Diane, Lorraine said, looking at Marcus's mother, your position in HR is also being eliminated. Mrs. Diane gasped. Nicole, Lorraine continued, looking at Marcus's sister, your consulting contract will not be renewed. Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Lorraine reached into her purse and pulled out the divorce papers Marcus had thrown at her. She unfolded them slowly, pulled out a pen, and signed them right there on stage, in front of everyone. You wanted the divorce, Marcus, Lorraine said softly. Here, you're free. She placed the papers on the podium. And so am I. She handed the microphone back to Mr. Gerald and walked off the stage. Her attorney and CFO followed. The room stayed silent. No one clapped. No one moved. Lorraine walked past Marcus's table without looking at him. As she passed, Chantel stood up suddenly, grabbed her purse, and speed-walked toward the exit. She didn't even say goodbye to Marcus, just left. Marcus sat down slowly, his hands shaking. His mother was crying. Nicole was staring at her phone in disbelief, and Marcus felt his whole world collapsing. The next 30 days were brutal for Marcus. He lost his job the very next morning. Security escorted him out of the building with a box of his things. His apartment was company housing, so he had to move out within 2 weeks. He tried calling Chantel. She blocked his number. He tried visiting her. She'd moved and didn't leave a forwarding address. He finally tracked her down through a mutual friend and confronted her at a coffee shop. You said you were pregnant, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Chantel looked at him with cold eyes. I lied, she said simply. I was never pregnant, Marcus. I just needed you to leave her so I could boost my brand, and it worked. Thanks for that. She stood up and left. Marcus sat there alone, destroyed. His mother and sister weren't doing any better. Mrs. Diane lost her HR position and couldn't find work anywhere else. Word had spread in the industry about what happened. No one wanted to hire someone who'd publicly humiliated a CEO. She had to sell her house to cover her debts and moved into a small apartment across town. Nicole's influencer career crashed overnight. The video she'd posted of Lorraine being humiliated at the birthday dinner resurfaced. People found out the full story, found out Lorraine was a self-made millionaire and Nicole's family had mocked her. The internet turned on Nicole fast. Her sponsors dropped her. Her followers started calling her a bully. She went from 500,000 followers to less than 10,000 in 2 weeks. She tried to apologize publicly, posted a tearful video saying she didn't know the full story. But it was too late. The damage was done. A popular blog called the Shade Gazette published an expose on Chantel. Turns out she had a pattern. She'd targeted 5 different men over the past 3 years, all of them rising in their careers. She'd date them, boost her brand using their success, then disappear the moment their value dropped. The article went viral. Chantel deleted all her social media and disappeared from the public eye completely. Marcus hit rock bottom 2 months after the gala. He was staying on his cousin's couch, barely eating, barely sleeping. He'd been to 12 auditions and got rejected from every single one. Casting directors had heard about the scandal. No one wanted to work with him. One day he decided to go to Lorraine's office. He didn't know what he'd say. He just needed to see her, needed to explain, needed to apologize. He took the bus downtown because he'd sold his car, walked into the sleek glass building where Hartwell Enterprises had its headquarters. The lobby was massive, all marble and steel, with Lorraine's company logo etched into the wall. Marcus walked up to the front desk. "I need to see Lorraine Hartwell," he said. The receptionist looked at him like he was crazy. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No, but Then I can't help you," she said, turning back to her computer. Marcus stood there, helpless. He looked up and saw the elevators, saw people in business suits walking in and out. Important people, people who belonged. He didn't belong here, he never had. Then he saw her. Lorraine stepped out of the elevator on the top floor. She was wearing a white blouse and black slacks, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was laughing at something her assistant said. She looked happy, free. She looked like she was glowing. Marcus's heart broke all over again. He pressed his hand against the glass, wanting to call out to her, but before he could, Lorraine glanced down. Their eyes met. For just a second. Marcus saw her see him, saw her register his presence. He expected her to look angry or sad or something, but Lorraine's face didn't change. She just looked at him like he was a stranger, like he was nobody, and then she turned back to her assistant and kept walking. Security approached Marcus. "Sir, you need to leave," one of them said. Marcus didn't fight. He just nodded, wiping his eyes, and walked out. He sat on the curb outside the building and cried. Not because he'd lost money, not because he'd lost status, but because he'd lost the one person who'd ever really loved him. And he'd thrown her away, like she was nothing. 3 months later, Lorraine stood in front of her grandmother's grave in rural Georgia. The cemetery was quiet, surrounded by tall pine trees and wildflowers. The headstone was simple. Betty May Hartwell, beloved grandmother, builder of dreams. Lorraine knelt down and placed fresh flowers on the grave. Yellow roses, her grandmother's favorite. "I did it, Grandma," Lorraine said softly, her fingers brushing the top of the headstone. "I built it, just like you told me to." She opened her locket. Inside was still the old photo of Miss Betty, but Lorraine had added something new, a second photo, a picture of herself standing in front of Hartwell Enterprises headquarters, smiling, wearing a business suit. She'd finally added herself to the locket. Finally claimed her space. "They didn't see me for a long time," Lorraine continued, her voice breaking a little. "They thought I was nothing, and for a while I believed them. But you taught me better than that. You taught me to build, even when they don't see, even when they don't believe." She closed the locket and pressed it to her heart. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above her. It felt like her grandmother was there, like she was proud. Lorraine stood up, wiping her eyes, and walked back to her car. She'd bought her grandmother's old house and renovated it, turned it into a retreat center for young women entrepreneurs, a place where they could come, learn, plan, and build their dreams without judgment, without noise. The house looked beautiful now. Fresh paint, a new porch, a garden full of flowers. But Lorraine kept Miss Betty's old kitchen shelf exactly the same. The Bible, the wedding photo, and now an empty space where the locket used to be. Because Lorraine wore it every day, she would never take it off. That evening, Lorraine sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. Birds sang in the trees. Everything was peaceful. Her phone buzzed. A notification from Forbes. They wanted to interview her for their Self-Made Women issue. Lorraine smiled, looked at the notification, and swiped it away. She didn't need the recognition. She didn't need the world to see her anymore. She'd already seen herself, and that was enough. She leaned back in her rocking chair, closed her eyes, and breathed in the warm Georgia air. She thought about Marcus, about his family, about Chantel, and she realized something. She didn't hate them. She didn't wish them harm. She just didn't think about them at all. They were part of her past. a chapter that taught her everything she needed to know about her worth. And now that chapter was closed. Lorraine opened her eyes and looked down at her locket, touched it gently. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for teaching me to build, even when no one was watching." The sun dipped below the horizon. The stars started to come out, and Lorraine sat there at peace, knowing she'd done exactly what she was meant to do. She'd built something that couldn't be torn down, not by betrayal, not by lies, not by people who couldn't see her. She'd built herself, and that was the greatest power of all. See, sometimes the people who treat you like you're nothing, they're the ones who got everything to lose. Lorraine didn't need revenge. She just stopped hiding. She stopped shrinking herself to make other people comfortable. And when they finally saw her, it was too late. The damage was done. But Lorraine didn't care, because she wasn't building for them anymore. She was building for herself, for her peace, for her future, for the little girl who used to run barefoot through her grandmother's garden, dreaming of something more. That little girl grew up. She became exactly who she was meant to be, and nobody, not Marcus, not his family, not anyone, could take that away from her. This story ain't just about a woman who got her revenge. It's about a woman who remembered her worth, who remembered that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. That being underestimated is sometimes the biggest advantage you can have. Because while they're laughing at you, you're building. And when they finally stop laughing and start paying attention, you're already 10 steps ahead. Lorraine learned that real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. And when the time is right, it shows up and changes everything. So if you're out there right now, feeling invisible, feeling underestimated, feeling like nobody sees what you're building, keep going, keep building in silence, in peace, with purpose, because one day they gon' see. And when they do, you won't need to say a word. Your work will speak for itself. Your success will speak for itself. Your peace will speak for itself. And that, right there, is the sweetest victory of all. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button, share it with somebody who needs to remember their worth, and drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? Let me know. I'll see y'all in the next one.